Okay, so again, thinking. I mean, these are all kind of Tibetan things. And if they don't have meaning, then we should chuck them out and put them in the bin, shouldn't we? But if there's meaning, it's good to know the meaning. So here we're thinking, we're going to listen to these teachings, and we then going to imagine offering all the marvelous things of the universe to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. That's the plan. It's kind of auspicious. We know that it's auspicious to offer something before receiving something, isn't it? It's kind of got meaning. So we just imagine all the marvelous things of the world and piling them all up and offering to the Buddha as a request. And if you know the little kind of mudra, the Buddhists, these Tibetans have their gang signs, their mudras. I always think the gangsters must have been in Tibetan monasteries, because in the Tibetan monasteries, they have these gangsters. They have this whole tradition of gangsters. They're called, what are they called now? I can't remember. Serious heavy duty dudes, you know, who fight and wear certain clothes and have chains, and they're like the guardians, and they're gangsters. So I'm sure all these current Latino gangsters must have been Tibetan Buddhist monks in a past life. Anyway, here we go. Go on then.
사시 perki 육신내조 드라브리 라브링지 니데견바디 상계신두 맥체오바이 루크남다시라 저박쇼 jetsunlama dampakyenam kechekikala kyense chutsintri jita sampe dukjesin mahala zabge chöki chapa vaptusol Idam Gururatna Mandalakam Yatayami.
Okay, so now just again setting ourselves on the right track, thinking we're going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and we're going to listen to these teachings, and the imprints, the seeds we leave in our mind from listening, may they ripen eventually as our own perfection, our own goodness, our own wisdom in the future, so we are qualified to help others. Sangye charang soke chognam la chanchu badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la chanchu badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la Jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi, dagi chunyen gipes sonam ki, drola penche sange drobash shok. Okay, so meditation, you know, big picture, long-term point of view. We need to cultivate single-pointed concentration. We need to have access to this subtler, more marvelous, more capable level of our own mind, which I always keep saying, which is important to hear it, is not even posited as existing in neuroscience and modern psychology, because it's a level of consciousness, a level of mind that doesn't depend upon the brain, as nutty as that sounds to modern Western people, you know, materialists, because we've got these subtler levels of mind. And why do we need concentration? This is the point. I mean, why do we need to have the mind to be at this subtler? Why do we have to access this microscope of our mind? This is the long term. Because it's only at that level of laser-like subtle focus can we do the work of finally removing from the mind all the, you know, layers and layers and layers and layers of misconceptions, of misconceptions, neurotic emotions and misconceptions that our minds are completely, that are embedded in our mind right now, simply from habit. That's it. That's the big picture long term. So within that, that's the long term. So then there's the first, so there's within that, there are two modes of meditation, broadly speaking. One is the first one, concentration. On the basis of success at that, to whatever degree, you then go to the second mode. And the general approach is to get insight. It's a great word in English, inner seeing. Like, you know yourself, if you think a problem through and you go, oh, I got a bit of insight into that problem today. It means you tasted the meaning, and we get that. So that's the purpose, long term, finally. Now, within that, there are lots and lots and lots of little techniques and meditations, various kinds of techniques that have been developed over the centuries that are kind of, techniques that have been passed on. It's just like, when you study classical music, you're taught all these different techniques, like the scales and the arpeggios and all the kinds of exercises that the teachers over the centuries have cultivated to help you sharpen your skills so you can play the piano. Well, these this is some of the techniques we've been talking about, So in general, then, the classical way, especially the way it's taught in the Tibetan tradition, the way you use these two modes of meditation, you listen to the teachings, like you would if you listen to your math teaching, you go home and you do your homework. Well, here, if you use Buddhist terminology, you listen to the teachings, you go home, you settle in your chair, you get some focus, you go to the second mode, and you use your focused mind, which you gain from being non-conceptual. You train the mind to be non-conceptual. You train the mind to focus, meaning not get involved in all the rubbish. And then you use that laser-like focus conceptually, but at a subtler level, to think through that material. So you get the insight. It's not that complicated, but because we hear this term analytical meditation, it kind of throws us. Now, that's the classical use of the two modes of meditation. Now, like I said, within that, there are these lots of techniques. So some of them, Sangye Kadu in her book, in the course notes, she's discussed. The one one little technique, for example, we did just briefly, I think, I forget, we talked about it, was, sometimes the lamas would do this to steady the mind before you do another technique. That's called the 9-round breathing. There's hundreds of little techniques that you can learn that have been cultivated, that are useful little techniques that help you do this final job, So then you've got the classical concentration technique itself, where you would say, the first thing that Buddha taught was you use the object to concentrate on would be the breath. That's the first mode of meditation, concentration meditation. And the goal of that is you take an object, and the object can be anything. The object could be a visualization. The object of your meditation could be the breath, or the object of meditation, such as in Mahamudra or Dzogchen, would be the nature of your own mind, the mind itself, the thoughts themselves. So you're using different objects. Mind always needs an object to focus on, to anchor itself to, to help the mind get concentration. Then you've got the formalized techniques, for example, the purification practice. Lots of those techniques are you're using concentration, but you're utilizing conceptuality. So when you do the 4 opponent powers, the purification practice, you're using your thinking. You're just doing it in a slightly more focused way, hopefully, because your eyes are closed and you're in one seat, and you can go a bit more deeply. You can do a bit more contemplation. There are lots of these kinds of techniques that have been passed along by our teachers, But like I said before, once you understood the principle, you can make up your own every day. It's not as if they're set in stone, There's no magic about them. So I think there's a very strong misconception, and especially in the modern world, it's an alternative to a pill, and there's something magic about meditation. It's a very concrete concept. No, it's your mind you're dealing with. Your mind is your mind, If if your mind's in a big mess, you're going to see your big messy mind. It's not going to be magic. But okay. So I think before we go further, I really want people just to make comments or ask questions, because I've no idea if my words are making any sense to you. I've got no idea. I don't know. I'm hoping they are. But are there any immediate questions in general about you're really not sure what meditation is. You really don't know why you're doing it. Ask me some questions. Be very straight, okay? If there are any. If there are not, that's really fine. But I want to hear them if there are questions. Don't kind of feel like, you might say something silly. Don't be ridiculous. Be very straightforward, please.
Yes, Samuel.
Okay, then. Good, Samuel.
Hello. I have a question which I'm not sure how to put precisely, but I've read in the course notes the chapter Meditation on the Mind Itself.
Okay, let's have a look. Okay, let's have a look. So let's go there. Meditation on the mind itself. Where is it? What page?
234.
Oh, you're in the phone version, are you?
Yes.
What chapter is it? What chapter is it?
Part 2.
In part 2. Okay. Go on.
14.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, page. I get it. Chapter 14, page 122. Okay. So go on. So what's the question? Good. What's the question?
So he says there that we basically in Mahamudra should cut off conceptuality.
That's right, precisely.
And I don't understand how it fits with the general framework of reading, listening, and meditating in that sequence.
Oh, I understand. Very good. Okay, very good. That's a good point. Thank you. Okay, first of all, remember the word meditate. Technically, literally, it translates in Tibetan, it translates as the verb to familiarize. So really the real meaning of to meditate is to familiarize your mind with something, which means to think it through. So the point is this, for Mahamudra, okay, if you got, there are two modes, remember, Samuel, there's concentration, and then there's the insight mode. And the methodology usually in the insight mode is to utilize thinking, but with your concentrated mind. But the first mode is simply to concentrate, is simply to be non-conceptual, attempt to be. So whether your object of meditation is the breath, or whether the object of your meditation is a visualization of the Buddha, or in this case, Mahamudra, whether the object of your meditation is the mind itself, that is what you're aiming to be non-conceptual. Now, until we're highly advanced, we're going to be conceptual. Our mind never stops. We know that. It raves on like a maniac, but that we're training the mind. We're training the mind to be non-conceptual. So so the listen, contemplate, meditate doesn't apply here. In Lama Yeshe's book, this is extracted from Lama Yeshe's book from years ago, but it's now been published as Mahamudra, and it's a very specific technique. First mode of meditation, you concentrate. The object you concentrate on is your mind itself. When the mind is steady to some degree, when your mind is steady, you go to the second mode of meditation, and you're staying on the mind. You're staying focused on the mind. You never move from that. But a part of your mind is watching, like they say, like a little fish moving in water without disturbing the water. So that this little fish, Lama Yeshe in his book calls it the mindfulness fish. He's so sweet. It's a tiny part of your mind going out, watching to see if you can see the way ego works. So this is not applying in this particular kind. The listening, first of all, you listen to your teachings on karma. You go home, you think it through, you sit down, you do your meditation, and then you meditate on it. You get the taste of it. That's the classic approach. Mahamudra is different. It's not conceptual. There's no listening, there's no thinking, and there's no then meditating. It's quite an advanced approach, actually. Let me give you the example. In Lama's book, he talks about Mahamudra, which is this extracted from years ago, I think. This is another edited version of it. There's two ways of, we all know this, you listen to this, the classical way of learning something, let's say music. You listen to the instructions, the theory, you think it through to make sense, and then you go to the piano and you play it, don't you? That's the listening, thinking, and then experiencing, meditating. So let's say here, the typical way in his book, the typical way he learned in the monastery, he listened to the teachings, he would go home to his room, he would then think it through to be logical, or they'd even do debate where it made sense, they'd think it through conceptually, and then you sit down on your meditation cushion, you get some concentration, and then you try to taste the meaning of it. That's the 3 steps. That's the classical way you learn anything. Now, but this approach, can you imagine, this shows how Mahamudra is more advanced. The other approach would be, you don't listen, you don't analyze, you go straight to the piano and you try to intuit Bach's music. Now, that's advanced, isn't it? Who can do that, you know? That's really quite advanced. That's what Mahamudra is. On the face of it, it sounds very simple. Oh, there's no thinking. As Lama says, there's no dogma, there's no this, there's no that, there's no this. You sit, you get concentration on your mind, then you watch the way ego functions in order to realize there is no I. So it's actually, on the face of it, technically simple, but actually an advanced technique. Can you imagine going straight to the piano and intuiting Bach and attempting to play it? That's advanced. So that's the answer. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So the classical way of using, I'll say it again, is to listen to the teachings. You go home, you think it through, or even as you're thinking of it, as you're listening, you're thinking it through. Oh, I get that. And then you internalize it in your meditation seat. Here, it's a more direct method. On the face of it, simple, but actually quite advanced to intuit, to get the direct experience of emptiness. Are we communicating? Samuel?
Yes. So
But
how?
Go on. Yeah, go on.
So how do we know when we are ready for this advanced?
You can start it. No, you can start immediately. You can try. I mean, this is, anybody can start. We did this. You know, Lama taught this retreat to brand new people. So you can start, but you obviously you can only do it according to your capacity. But this is what's interesting, Samuel, also. Many people who don't know, I mean, the Buddhist view of the mind is really quite specific, as we've taught a little, as we've learned a little bit in module 1. The mind is quite a particular way of presenting what the mind is. And unless we know a little bit about what our mind is, even know how to distinguish between a neurotic state of mind and a virtuous state of mind, we don't talk that way in modern psychology. So some people who've got, you know, who like the idea of meditate, they sit down, but as Lama Yeshe says, many end up in psychiatric hospitals because the mind is a very powerful thing. And as soon as you close your eyes and you're focusing only on your mind, and if you have no idea what's going on and no idea what is arising and don't know what to do with it, you can be in serious trouble. And it's not trying to be superstitious. So Mahamudra, if you've got some merit and you've done some practice, it's a brilliant technique just to sit there and attempt it. It's marvelous just to sit and concentrate on your mind and then to check to see if you can notice your ego and how it functions. It's excellent. It's a very good practice. That's why I really recommend you getting Lama Yeshe's book, from which this has been extracted years ago. He gave this teaching in the early 80s. And it's obviously he must have, because he died in 83. Yeah. So Mahamudra, I highly recommend. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. Anybody can try. Give it a go, you know, it's marvelous. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. And that's where you see, that's just, sometimes it can be very, you know, when the mind is overwhelmed, you've got so many dramas and you've been stuffing your head full of, let's say you're studying the Dharma too intensively, or you've got a lot of overwhelming stuff in your life, just to sit down and simply watch your mind. It's very marvelous technique. It's so simple, but because when you see, the key is this, we're so used to being completely immersed in our thoughts, Samuel. And especially if you're having a drama, you know, we're so immersed in the drama, in the pain of it, and all the story that the anger is telling, the depression is telling. It's very hard for us to step outside the head, just to step back and simply observe the thoughts without any involvement in them. But it's a brilliant technique if we can do it. And we need to do it anyway, Samuel. Every day we need to do this in our daily life, instead of being completely mindlessly immersed in our emotions. And then when they rise up strongly, we go crazy. We need to learn to step out of our head and just observe without commentary. We need to do that no matter what. That really is what you learn in Mahamudra, but we all must learn to do that. And when we can observe more objectively, we then, if we want to check up what's going on, we can say, well, there's anger, there's jealousy, there's this, and then we can talk to ourselves in daily life, you know, but we need to be able to see. It's not easy. I mean, when we're really ordinary world, being immersed in our own thoughts, and if I'm angry with my boyfriend and someone says, well, I should try and look at my anger, I won't even know what it means. What do you mean I should look at my anger? My boyfriend is the problem, because we're so fixated on the external object. So to learn to notice the internal without commentary, which is what you learn in Mahamudra, is anyway a crucial job we need to learn to do. Are we communicating?
Yeah. Well, I think it's not for me, at least, and it's very confusing to me, this whole concept. So I think I'd better just leave it aside.
I know, but I don't want to push you, but it's interesting you should say it's confusing. Can you tell me exactly which piece of what I just said is confusing? This is a really good question.
Yeah, I I've read part of the book by Lama Yeshe, the Mahamudra book.
Yeah, good.
And in there he says that generally, as far as I remember, generally speaking, we should we divide our mind into bad mind and good mind. We say that the delusions are bad, and the good part is obviously good. But in Mahamudra, we just watch everything.
Okay. Okay, I hear what you're saying. So he's not contradicting. He's not contradicting that there are delusions. He's not saying there isn't anger, and that he's not even saying that anger is not harmful to you. All he's saying, and this is what I'm trying to say here, Samuel, we do need to be able to step out of our head and observe. You can still say that's anger, that's love, that's compassion. But at a more subtle level, they're all just your mind. And it's necessary to be able to merely observe them. Because what happens is we see anger, then we jump into it, we criticize ourselves, we get guilty, and then we increase the drama. So it's part of our process to just observe. And by just observing and not giving power, already it's quite tasty, you know. Are you understanding? It doesn't mean Lama's not saying there's no anger there. He's not saying that there isn't virtue. Of course there is, but this is a particular method. But if it's confusing, I agree with your point. If it's just a bit confusing, then let it be, Samuel. You're being very sincere. It's excellent. Let it be. Let it be. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so helpful. Thank you. Really helpful. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, what I want to hear from people.
And Stina has a question.
Yes, sweetheart.
Yes. Hi, good evening, or maybe for you, good morning.
It is indeed morning.
I'm not
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Venerable. I have to start by saying I haven't read Lama's book on Mahamudra.
Okay. Okay.
But what is the difference between what you're describing now, the Mahamudra, observing the mind, and in Shamatha practice, there's something I think you call it settling the mind in its natural.
It's the same. It's the same. You see, the Mahamudra technique is involving the two modes of meditation. The first one is the concentration mode, is the mindfulness mode. But instead of being the breath that you're observing the thoughts themselves. Then the second mode, the insight mode, is a very particular approach. So forget that. So it's exactly the same as concentration. The first component is concentration. The difference is the object isn't the breath or a visualization. It's simply whatever pops up in your mind. You stay focused on that moment by moment. So it's exactly the same.
Okay, thank you.
It's concentration meditation. It's the same technique, but it's the object is different. Instead of the breath, it's the thoughts themselves. But the process is the same.
But within Shamatha, I think, I mean, as I understand it, you can have different focuses than the breath.
You can have what, darling? You can have what?
Other focuses than other objects than the breath.
Can take yes, there are all sorts of things you can focus on. Exactly. Yeah, the type of meditation is to learn to focus on sort of you're anchoring your mind to something in order to kind of get, in order not to have the mind to be berserk. That's the point. So breath is example. Visualization is a very typical Tibetan one. It can be even, you can sit there in your meditation and you can, like say, you're thinking through the teachings about karma that you've just heard. And then suddenly you go, oh, I get that. And you can focus on that insight. You can focus on that feeling. You could even do that, you know. So yes, the object can be different depending on the person, and you can change those. But the function itself of that kind of meditation is its function is to not engage in the thinking. That's exactly right. Are we communicating?
We are. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm very glad. Thank you, Stina. Thank you. Thank you. Who else there, Tara?
Looks like no one. Anyone else?
Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
So now let's then talk about, so okay, you've got two parts, you've got two main approaches in Buddha's teachings. You've got the sutra teachings and you have the tantric teachings, the more advanced teachings. So this is particularly in the Tibetan tradition, of course, and the type of meditation here, the two modes of meditation still apply. The difference is instead of merely thinking through karma, thinking through emptiness, and then getting an insight into it in the second mode. You instead use visualization. So still, it's still conceptuality. By visualizing something or by thinking something through, you're using the same part of your mind. You're using your capacity to conceptualize something. When you're thinking through when you're thinking about your new girlfriend, you're using both thoughts and visualization. You're imagining her, but it's using the conceptual part of our mind. So the tantric approach is, it's the same principle based on karma. The Buddhist view of karma, which we're going to go into in module whatever it will be, every millisecond of what we think and do and say doesn't go astray. Everything we think and do and say leaves imprints or seeds or tendencies or habits in our mind. And of course, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop the habit to become a Buddha. So we're trying to familiarize our mind with virtue and wisdom. So eventually we've perfected our mind. So the particular method here is to visualize the different manifestations of the different psychological qualities, and they're called the Buddhas, in this different form. So, you've got all these different Buddhas. You've got, okay, let's just talk briefly about this one. Behind me, you've got Shakyamuni Buddha. This is the classic form of the Buddha, the person who lived in India, a couple of thousand years ago. And that form of the Buddha is called the emanation body. It's the form that looks like you and me. If we'd been around at the time, we would have seen this nice fellow walking around looking like all the other thousands of sadhus in India with his yellow robe on. That's how they dressed. And then, he would have been the person we would have checked up on. He would have become our guru, our teacher. And then, we would have followed his instructions. So here's the statue depicting him from 2,500 years ago, a person that regular people can see. Then you've got the more subtle form of the Buddha, which is depicted in Tantra, the Vajrayana teachings. And this form of the Buddha is all the different Buddhas that we read about and hear about, like Chenrezig and Tara and Manjushri and Amitabha and many, many thousands of these Buddhas. But there are sort of like 5 groups of them. They call them the 5 Buddha families. You might hear about that. And each of them, Amitabha is one. Akshobhya is another. There are 5 of them, and they each represent different psychological qualities, but in particular, the negative, they represent the purified aspect of certain negative qualities. So, this is the one that was more advanced in Buddhist psychology, in tantric psychology. So Amitabha, for example, is the manifestation of purified attachment energy. And in that family, there are hundreds of other Buddhas like Tara, Chenrezig, Vajrayogini, all different other Buddhas in that grouping that are related in particular to the purification of attachment. Then you've got Akshobhya, and he's like the purification of anger, and all these different Buddhas are in that family. So it's really just Buddhist psychology, but it's initially quite surprising, because who would have thought pictures of green ladies and red gentlemen would have been psychology? But that's what it is. It's nothing other than psychology. If there's something in Buddhism that doesn't finally help you develop your perfection, it's a load of rubbish, So then by visualizing, by imagining these forms of the Buddha, it's just another method of developing the qualities that you want to cultivate. So if you meditate on visualizing Chenrezig, who is the manifestation of love and compassion, then instead of doing a meditation on compassion by thinking through, like, say, the meditation called Tonglen, that's one method of developing compassion, thinking through certain thoughts, imagining offering your suffering, taking on the suffering of others, imagining being loving and kind to others. They're all just using a conceptuality, and that's one method of getting compassion. But this other method is you visualize in front of you the embodiment of compassion, and then you do certain visualizations, you imagine certain things, you imagine purifying, and then at some point you imagine absorbing that into you. And then when you've taken the empowerments into these practices, you then practice identifying yourself as the Buddha of compassion. The way they talk in Tantra is by doing these practices, especially when you've taken the empowerment into them, they're really these marvelous psychological methods, very kind of advanced in a way, more powerful, a way they talk about you're bringing the end result into the present. It's a bit like, you're practicing tennis. When you sit there visualizing yourself winning Wimbledon, you actually see yourself winning Wimbledon. You're bringing the future result into the present, which is a cause to win Wimbledon, because you're imagining it. I mean, it's not just fantasy. So visualizing Chenrezig, absorbing Chenrezig into you, identifying yourself as Chenrezig is a powerful method for exactly that to occur. So they're marvelous techniques, really, but if you understand psychologically what you're trying to do, not just some fantasy of visualizing some white male or green lady or something, you know. Because all of these different Buddhas simply are visual manifestations of different psychological qualities, either that you want to cultivate, like Chenrezig, compassion, or that you want to purify. So one of the deities, well, the deity is a word they really, it's equivalent of the word Buddha, but it's used in Tantra. The more advanced practice, for example, is a Buddha called Vajrayogini. She's a manifestation of purified attachment. So you either do practices that cultivate compassion, Chenrezig, or purify the delusion. So they're much more, they're marvelous approach, psychologically quite brilliant, you know. So in Tantra, there's this concept of you're able to utilize everything in the mind, which brings us really to Samuel's point in a way when we can begin to understand emptiness more. This has great meaning, you know. So the ones before you've taken empowerments, many of these practices that are quite popular among Tibetan Buddhists, you can do them without having received empowerment. So the classic first one, of course, and Sangye Kaido's got that in her book here, is visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha. There's a meditation, like for example, you know, yesterday was a special day in the Tibetan calendar. So we did it with Geshe Sherab. We did a meditation on Shakyamuni Buddha, you know. So that's a very, Tara is really popular. Chenrezig is popular. There are practices related to the different Buddha families. You know, Amitabha is very popular among people. One can do meditations on Amitabha and recite his mantra. So this way you're connecting to that energy that Buddha represents and thus increasing that quality within you. And also they're very uplifting, you know. I mean, we can do one. We'll do one today. I'll think of what to do. Maybe we'll do Chenrezig or something. We'll do that. And they're quite uplifting. Kind of, we can be overwhelmed if you try to study the Dharma and you're studying the Lam Rim and you're getting involved in all the details of this and that and squeezing your brain. Here you just, you know, it's much more uplifting because what you're doing is you're identifying with those qualities. And this is another one, especially Lama Yeshe would teach this a lot to us in the West. Because when he first met a bunch of Westerners, the hippies in the early 70s, you know, late 60s, early 70s, he really could see this kind of incredible addiction to our misery. I mean, he'd crack jokes and say, you people don't even know how to be happy. You know how to be miserable. Because we love to find fault. We love to see all our misery and love to point out our fault and think we're hopeless and a disaster. So he would teach us these practices from day one, a way of lifting ourselves and causing us to identify with our good qualities, which is what you're trying to do as a Buddhist anyway. So they're really marvelous practices. But again, they're using the same two modes of meditation. You've got to get some concentration in the first mode, and then you're developing insight, quote unquote, by doing the visualization, because you're becoming familiar with the meaning of that particular Buddha, and then identifying yourself with it. So any questions about that? That type of meditation? Any questions, or is it clear what I'm saying?
Miriam?
Yes.
Hi, Venerable.
Hello.
Can you talk a little bit more about empowerment? Just, it's not taking refuge, I suppose, right?
No, refuge is a step that you take in the very first stages of your
Yes.
practice when you decide you've committed to being a Buddhist. So you do a formal little ceremony with somebody when you take refuge, and then you might or might not at the same time take the 5 layperson's vows. And that's in the sutra teachings. Then later on in the sutra teachings, you would then take the bodhisattva vows, which is the more advanced ones of the Mahayana path. And then when you enter into Vajrayana, you would then take an empowerment into one of these practices. And so then, and that's the most advanced level. So really an empowerment, as the word sort of implies, it's like they use the word initiation as well, which is a weird word for us, I think, in ordinary daily life, you know. It just means, you know, you've got a person up there, you've decided you want to take this empowerment, when you've decided you want to do this particular practice, and then you think about, you check up what the requirements are from the Lama giving it, and you sit in the crowd, the Lama's there, and he goes through it, he says, visualize this, visualize that. He's sort of passing on. It's like passing it on to you, really. It makes sense, you know. I mean, I always use the example of what an empowerment is. And it's not, don't mystify it. I always use the example of when I first learned to make a cake from my mum. It sounds hilarious to use it as an example, but do you think about the meaning? I wanted to make a cake. I wanted a person who's qualified. I'd done checking up on my mum. I'd already eaten her cakes. I'd eaten her daughter's cakes. I was at home in Australia, went home from London, and I said, Mum, please show me how to make a cake. So I asked her, basically, I checked up on the teacher. This is important about a teacher. I checked up. I was confident about her qualities. I wanted to learn how to make a cake. I knew she had the qualities. I said, please show me. And then she showed me. Now, this is the point I'm getting at. I remember vividly the day, the cake, the time. It's in my mind. Because why? It's the first time the cakes became real for me. My mother there's a lovely term in Tibetan, rigsin, knowledge holder. My mother's a knowledge holder of cakes. I checked up on her. I knew that she knew what she was talking about. I said, please show me how to make a cake, Mum. So she gave me an empowerment. Think about it. She passed on her knowledge from her mind into my mind. I wanted it. I received it. And I remember it vividly. So it's just exactly what an empowerment is. You receive this kind of, it's like they would say, receive a blessing. But it's got to be a knowledge holder. You should check up on that person. You should be confident they're going to be one of your teachers. Please, I'd like this empowerment to Tara. You sit there and you receive it from the person, from their mind into your mind. So you're empowered now to do that practice. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Good, Miriam. Yes, Lou. You have a question, Lou. Yes, Lou.
I had a question, but I think you answered. I was going to ask you about the prerequisites for empowerment.
Okay, well, now let me say a bit more than the prerequisites. I'll say a bit more. So the prerequisites in general, first of all, Lama Tsongkhapa says the prerequisites are 3. And this is now pointing to the whole path. The first prerequisite is you need some renunciation. You need to understand what suffering is, according to the Buddha's teachings, karma, the delusions, and literally the mechanics of why we suffer. That's the first stages of the Lam Rim. Then the next prerequisite is to have some appreciation for compassion and bodhicitta, a real understanding of what that is, the wish to be of benefit to others. And the third prerequisite is to have some real appreciation of the meaning of emptiness. So that's, in essence, the summary of the entire path to enlightenment from the sutra point of view, Lou. So again, a confident appreciation for renunciation, giving up suffering, and understanding what suffering is, an appreciation for bodhicitta, and an appreciation of emptiness. If you've got those 3 firmly in your mind from having studied and thought about and contemplated the Lam Rim, then you are qualified to then take an empowerment. I mean, we have to know what it means, though, to have even those 3. Then you'd be ready to go to the next stage. So then there are, in Tantra, though, there are various levels of empowerments. So there are some practices that you can do without having received the empowerment. There's 4 levels of Tantra. So the practices that are popular, like Chenrezig and, say, Tara or Medicine Buddha, they belong to the first level, which is called Action Tantra. Then there are the more advanced levels, say the 4th one, called Highest Yoga Tantra. Those practices you can't do unless you receive an empowerment. And when you receive those empowerments, that's when you take the 3rd set of vows, which are called the tantric vows. So the lamas would, I mean, it's actually highly sophisticated psychology. It's the only way to say it without sounding silly. And so, as Lama Zopa says, don't even think in this life that you're going to get many realizations using Tantra, because really, to get realizations, you have to be a pretty advanced person psychologically. And have done much of this work. But we can have, by doing the practices, we leave strong imprints in the mind, make a strong connection with the Buddhas. So by having confidence in the practices, and then when you take the empowerment, you be clear what the prerequisites are from the Lama, what vows you're taking. You need to know what you're doing, because that's one of the big problems. We never know what we're doing. So you're confident, and then you keep your commitments. This is one of the key things in these practices. You do your practice every day. You do whatever the Lama has requested, and you keep it with great sincerity. Then, you slowly get the realizations. Do you understand?
Thank you. Yes, I do.
Good. Great.
Thank you, Bella.
But the techniques, again, the meditation technique, all meditations fit into either concentration mode or it's the second mode. They all fit into these 2. That's the one thing that's really important to remember. Otherwise, you just got this big soup of thousands of meditations and you can't see the relationship between them. But they're either a concentration technique, which is shamatha, or they're from the second mode, which is called insight, whether it's visualization, whether it's watching the nature of your mind, whether it's thinking about emptiness. They're all the second mode. So all the techniques can fit into these 2 modes. And that's why if you understand that the methodology of these 2 modes, it'll make a lot of sense to you, So let's look at the practices that Sangha has put in here. And I'm hoping you've done all these together and you're going to do them on your practice day. So the very first one she taught was awareness of the breath. That's concentration. You watch the breath. The second one, this sweet little technique called the 9-round breathing, which is one that helps you steady the mind. And then she combines that. Once you've steadied the mind, then you just simply watch the mind, which is a bit similar to Lama's approach. Then she's used an example in chapter 6 of one of the analytical meditations. This is the way you approach the study. Like, you know, you study a math, you listen to the teachings on math, you go home, you get some concentration, and then in the second mode of meditation, you think through what you've learned, and then it will trigger an insight. You'll learn it. It'll become experiential. So there are these meditations on all the different stages of the Lam Rim, and they're just conceptual. They're just thinking through certain points, thinking things through, but because you're sitting on your cushion, your eyes are closed, it becomes more.
Well, hold on a minute here. She may realize, I think. There we go. She'll pop off and back on in a moment.
I'm here again.
There we go.
It's the light body of Vajrasattva. So that's from Tantra, but the actual process is thinking through karma, which is from the very first stages of the sutra practice. But that's a formalized technique that's been put together, but you can also do it very simply. You know, you can do it very easily, very simply, very experientially. It doesn't have to be all kind of technical with Sanskrit words and all this business, you know. The 4 opponent powers, that practice is very powerful. And then you've got meditation on impermanence, which is another variation of thinking something through. And then there's the visualization meditation that she's done on the Buddha. So I think we might finish with that today. So, I mean, we've touched on everything really. But I think if you study these course notes as you go through, heard what I've said to enhance what you've read here, and then read the other teachings by Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, and Geshe Jamba Tekchok in the second part. And these course notes are quite short. The trouble is the next course you're going to do, which is one that I taught, was about 3 times the size. So it's about 400 pages. I'm so sorry, because I talk fast, it seems. So it's 3 times everybody else's words. This is only 168 pages. Now, Sangha Khada's 103, her teachings, over 6 sessions. I'm afraid mine are like 400. I'm very sorry. Can't help it. So anyway, maybe we need a break after the next module. Who knows?
It's okay.
You know, besides doing the meditation, I think I've really tried to get the essence of what it means to meditate, because there's so many misconceptions. It's hard to cut through those, you know. And of course, everything, like anything, like you can say there's how to play tennis. Well, it's called to your capacity, isn't it? Same with meditation, obviously, you know. I mean, Samuel's point, should I do it? Anybody can try. There's no question. We've got to know what you're doing. But it depends. I know when I first started we did a course with Lama back early in the early days. And because I was so berserk at the time, I didn't know what he was talking about. You know, I mean, I didn't know what he meant. Look at my mind. Because I was swimming in the middle of my mind. You can't see it when you're in the middle of it. You've got to step back, you know. That's the point that's so important. And again, the key thing is too, the more you understand the distinction between a delusion and a virtue, the more that informs your capacity to meditate well. It's incredibly important, you know. And that's something that's quite unique to Buddhist psychology. What time is it? 1:45. Well, let's just do a meditation. Let's just do Shakyamuni Buddha. I don't know, Sangha Khada's got her style. I'll just do my style, okay? Let's just do a meditation. We'll use Shakyamuni Buddha. And Lama teaches it as well. Lama would always do his own style. Just a moment, excuse me. Okay. So the body, get the body straight. So what we've been through that a couple of times. Let's do that again. So I'll repeat all the points. All the great yogis over the centuries who are seriously meditating, seriously trying to realize the nature of their mind, Dzogchen or Mahamudra, seriously trying to get real, realize emptiness, whatever. And they found that there are various points about the body that are important, that make it conducive for the mind to do the job properly. And there's about 8 points, 7 or 8 points. So the first one, of course, as I always quote, and it's important to hear it, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, it's marvelous if you start your session, even for like a second, in full lotus position, because there's something about this, you see, in the Tantric, in the Vajrayana model of the way we're constructed, we've got the gross body and the gross mind, which is our sensory, but then we've got subtle mind, which is all our thoughts. They're subtle, and they are linked to all the wind energies coursing through these 72,000 subtle channels of our subtle body. And so to have these, if the body is upright, that helps all this wind energy flow smoothly. And because our different states of mind are linked to the wind energies, then it'll help the mind be clear. This is the subtler one. So the yogis have all found that sitting in full lotus position, because if you're sitting in your cave for days on end and you're sitting in full lotus, you don't topple over. You're as stable as a mountain, So it's got a practical meaning. Most of us maybe can't do that, but you can try. And it's auspicious, His Holiness said, to start your session just for a second. It sort of creates the cause to be able to do it in the future in the more advanced practices. So that would be, the left leg up on the right thigh, and then the right leg in front on the left thigh. You can practice. Some people are flexible. If you can put one up on the one thigh, that's good. If not that, regular cross-legged. If not that, we sit in a chair. Or whatever we can do. So if you're sitting in a chair, so if you're sitting cross-legged, you need to find the way your bottom should be. Ideally, if your body's very flexible and you're able to sit cross-legged or sit in the full lotus position, your legs will be very stretched out and be flat on the ground. So then you'd have a cushion just under your coccyx, just to prop you up slightly, to thrust you slightly forward. Then it's very stable. If you're not sitting cross-legged, if you're in a chair, then it's important you don't slump into the chair, because this is one of the crucial points that's a misconception in the modern world, is that meditation is a relaxation technique. By definition, it is not a relaxation technique. Yoga teaches wonderful relaxation techniques, but this is not. So concentration especially is the exact opposite. I mean, it's like thinking that driving the car in the freeway with 6 lanes of cars, you've got to relax. Well, if you don't know how to drive and you relax, you'll be dead, guaranteed. So when you know how to meditate, well, of course your mind will be relaxed, but you've got to get there first. You need much will, much determination, much effort to get the mind to go where you want it to go. So this is not a relaxation technique. You need to be super alert. So the body then needs to be upright, not slumping into the back of the chair, and your feet firmly planted on the ground. So the main point in these first 8 that they talk about is your legs and then your bottom. So we're adding it slightly because we're sitting up cross-legged. So then they mention your shoulders, have them upright, but not tense. So I would add to this all our muscles. If we sit upright, if we put our body upright, we tense the muscles. So hold your body upright. I always think of it like my whole sort of skeleton is like hanging on a hanger. Everything's upright, but then all the fat and the muscles are all hanging on the skeleton, but they're completely relaxed. So hold your body upright and they're consciously flop the muscles, especially around the abdomen. It doesn't say this in the text, but you check. We always squeeze our abdomen, squeeze our body. So hold your body upright, but flop the muscles. Let them completely relax. And it's a perfect combination of being upright and alert, but relaxed. But in the text, I just mentioned the shoulders. I'm adding the other part. The hands, there's many mudras or gestures that the yogis over the centuries have used, but the classic one we first learn is the left underneath like this, right on top, thumbs forming a triangle like this in your lap. But if you don't like that, you can have your hands on your knees. It's okay, you decide. Then finally is the head, various points about the head. Not thrust back. That's important. Be very conscious of that, because that makes the mind agitated. The head should be slightly tilted forward. Chin tucked in a little bit. Jaw relaxed. Lips slightly apart. The tip of the tongue resting behind the top teeth, just near the palate, which seems odd, but actually the yogis have found, as I've often said, that it prevents you from dribbling, prevents you from swallowing your spit, which is obviously necessary if you're meditating for many hours. Tip of the tongue behind the top teeth, just near the palate. Jaw relaxed, lips apart, and breathing through your nose. Do your best. And now your eyes. Again, you see, the great yogis who sit there for hours and on end throughout the day meditating, it's important for the mind to be super sharp. This is one of the major obstacles when we learn to do the concentration technique, which we'll start with. We'll do that before we do the Shakyamuni Buddha. So the tendency of the mind is either to be super busy, or if we relax, then the mind becomes too relaxed and we space out. So the danger is always to go between, is to not have the mind space out. So having the eyes open, especially if you're a good meditator with good concentration, the light comes in and helps keep your mind sharp. But most of us don't have very good concentration, so we get distracted probably. So have your eyes lightly closed. But the danger is to space out. This is the biggest danger in meditation. As soon we know ourselves, the habit, as soon as you close your eyes, you go to sleep. It's just the habit. So we've got to watch it. So have your eyes lightly closed, even not totally. But beneath your eyelids, have your eyes looking down, as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground. So if you like, have a little bit of light getting in. So now you settle into this position, please, and you forget all about it, because your body doesn't meditate. I can't stress this enough, because we're so addicted to our bodies. We get, oh, I'm meditating, look at me, It's just your body, your mind now has to start doing its job. So why don't we first, we'll do a combination of techniques all together. We'll kind of do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We'll lead on from one to the next, just to get a taste. We'll first do the breath, then we'll focus on the mind, then we will do Shakyamuni. So we'll do a bunch of stuff together. Okay. So watching the breath is a concentration technique, how to get calm abiding, shamatha. But actually in the long run, if you're really trying to get calm abiding, you would not use the breath, because it's an external object. Eventually, when the mind gets very subtle, it's beyond the physical. So the breath is just the beginning, but we can do that. We'll start with the breath. So now first, before we start, locate the sensation, okay, very precisely. Just do a couple of breaths all the way in, all the way out, not loud, not forced, but the couple of breaths, just locate that sensation. It's the general area around the tip of your nose. And you can see when you go out and go in, it's slightly different, but just locate that general sensation. Take a couple of breaths and locate it first. Okay, so now what we're going to do, let's say 5 minutes, and that's a long time, I tell you. If you can be alert for 5 minutes, you're doing a really good job. And the key one is, do not confuse feeling good with being alert. Alert is the main one. You got to watch your breath like a hawk without missing one. That's the goal. So naturally, the mind will wander off, or we'll notice all the crazy thoughts. But the job is not to pay attention to the thoughts, not to want them to go away, not to criticize yourself, not to label the thoughts. That's not your job. Your job is to stay like a hawk on that sensation. That's your job. It's very simple technically. You're training yourself to stay. In other words, to pay attention to that sensation every time. So another part of your mind, a bit more here. There's two parts working at the moment. One part is called attention, that watches the breath. Another part is called mindfulness. It's one particular function of your mind that when it notices attention wandering off, it's like a mummy, it brings the attention back to the breath. Mindfulness has the function of bringing yourself back to the object. That's what you're going to be doing for 5 minutes. So with determination, simply pay attention to the breath. Just keep the mind sharp, the attention sharp on the breath. Let the thoughts come and go like busy neighbors. Don't pay attention to them. Don't think they should go away. Let them come. It doesn't matter. Pay attention to the breath. That's your focus. Stay alert, sharp. Don't space out. Bring the attention back to the breath. That's it. Just stay on the breath. Don't sink into the pleasant feelings and comfort. That's not meditation. So that's 5 minutes. So just relax, just kind of open your eyes, wriggle your body, but stay focused, but just kind of relax for about 1 minute. And then we'll go to the next 5 minutes and we'll now change the object of concentration. But just relax first. Keep your mind sharp. We did a whole retreat with Lama, and he made us do 5-minute sessions, because 5 quality minutes is far superior than 20 minutes spacing out. You know, that's useless. So just relax for a second. Okay, so get settled again. Check your body, your legs, your back, shoulders, muscles, hands, neck, chin, jaw, tongue, eyes. Settle in again. And then forget about the body. So now we're going to use the same parts of our mind. There's many parts of our mind. One's called attention, one's called intention. There's many, many, many. The piece here that's doing the watching is called attention. And the piece that's watching the attention, like a mummy, to bring the attention back to the breath, back to the object, is called mindfulness. It's just a very specific function of the mind that catches the attention and brings it back to the object. That's its job. So just think of those two for now. So attention does the work. So now, though, we're going to shift the focus. We're not going to watch the breath. You can't help but notice your breathing, but that's not the focal point. So now, and this sometimes gets a bit weird, it gets different. We've tried this, but the focal point is whatever thoughts pop up in your mind. That's it. When this is advanced, when this gets better, it leads to the object turning into the clarity of your mind, which is, and that's quite subtle, but don't even think about that. Just the focal point is whatever pops up in your mind. Attempt to focus on that. Same as before, but the object is different. Just watch your thoughts and let them come and let them go. No commentary, no analysis, no wishing they weren't there. And this is the point. Whatever the thoughts are, even if you're angry, try and just watch it. Try and step back and simply watch. It's quite a good exercise. No comment, no commentary. Just watch the thoughts. Keep the attention very alert. And when your attention wanders, mindfulness will bring it back. Keep your attention sharp and clear, not spaced out. So relax again. Just open your eyes, wriggle your body, get kind of settled, and then we'll do the visualization technique. Okay, just get your body right, check it up again, your muscles relaxed, body upright, hands, neck, jaw, tongue, eyes. So now we've done some concentration. So that's the first mode. Now we're going to go to the second mode, and we're going to construct a visualization. It's like imagine. We're going to imagine. So 99% of people can't do this very well, so don't worry about it. The main thing is to have the feeling of the presence of the Buddha, if you can have that. But the form, so we'll just go through, we imagine the best we can. It's like painting a picture in our mind, and we're using the second mode here. The idea is you'd start your session with some concentration, so your mind's more focused. Now we go to the second mode, the insight one, and we're going to use this capacity for analysis, but it's visual. But it's still the same part of your mind. So in the sky in front of you, about sort of comfortable eye level. You've seen enough statues, maybe of the Buddha, to kind of get a memory of it. So imagine him though made of light. He's not like a statue. Golden light. His body is kind of like golden light. He's sitting in the robes of a monk, as you see in the pictures, like gold saffron robes. The right arm is bare. The left arm is covered. And he's sitting in full lotus position. So you see his right foot in front of the other, in left, on his thighs, on his insteps, whatever you call it. Each foot on the other one. The right is in front. So just sort of start at the top. Now, so he's sitting first. So start at the sitting. He's sitting on a multicolored lotus. I think it's multicolored. I forget. Maybe it's white lotus. It's a white lotus, I think. Imagine a white lotus. He's sitting on that. Then you imagine on that lotus, there's a sun disk and a moon disk, like two flat cushions. You can't see them, but they represent compassion and wisdom. You imagine they're there. And that lotus is sitting on a throne. When you visualize a person, like Shakyamuni is a person, as opposed to Tara, who's more like the Buddha style, the different style, you see them on a throne. It's like it's a seat. It's a very polite, nice seat. They call it a throne. It's usually a higher kind of structure, you know, and they're sitting on this, and it's all said to be meant to be very beautiful, like as you would offer to a Buddha. And it's held up in each corner by 2 green snow lions. I mean, they're green and they've got white manes, I think, and they're like protectors, I think. So do your best. Imagine on each corner, you know, 2 snow lions holding up this throne in the sky, with the lotus on top, and on the lotus, the sun disk and the moon disk, and then Buddha sitting on there. And he's got his yellow robes on. Everything's made of light. Everything's radiant. And his hands, we'll go to the top now. So his face. So you see in all the statues, and I never really understand the meaning. I mean to ask all these years, but I never do. This top knot, you know, they call it a nushnisha. But remember, Professor Robert Thurman said he's got so many brains, they're popping out. So maybe that's a good enough explanation for that top knot. I never know what it means. And for whatever reason, again, I don't understand. All his hairs are curled to the right. I don't know the meaning of all these things. They're all in the literature, you know. So you see him with his hair and his top knot, and then his face and his eyes, they call it half closed and half open. Sort of they're in meditative mode, looking down, but you see his eyes are open. But this half open, half closed is indicating his capacity to cognize relative and absolute phenomena simultaneously. But incredibly compassionate looking, very loving. And try and imagine, you see, if you've got a spiritual teacher, a mentor, a lama, a guru, a person you've related to as the Buddha for you, you think it's their mind manifesting as the Buddha for you. Same thing. Buddha's mind, your lama's mind, same. It makes it very personal. Whether this is a male or female Buddha, whether the teacher is male or female, doesn't matter. So here's a male form, the Buddha, and looking very lovingly at you. Think like this, if you can imagine. Because you see, the Buddha's qualities, it's hard to imagine this, we've all got the potential, are totally perfected. There's no delusions, there's no ego, there's no sense of a separate me, there's no neuroses, there's no attachment. There's only joy and bliss and love and compassion multiplied like unimaginably. The best you can do is try and imagine how much love and compassion. And it's totally personal. His mouth is said to be red from teaching with compassion. His body's golden light. Very beautiful. Should make you happy to see. And then his robes, and then his hands in his lap, his left hand holding a begging bowl. I don't know, they say different things about this, but imagine it's got all the medicine in it, all the methods that you need to practice to help you become the Buddha in that begging bowl. And his right hand is on his right knee, the palm pointing down. And this is said to be when he was sitting under the tree in Bodh Gaya, determined never to move, not to move from that seat until he became enlightened. So he said, the earth is my witness. So it's called the earth touching mudra. His hands pointing down and the fingers touching. Well, he'd be touching the top of the lotus, wouldn't it, you know? You imagine like that. Left hand in his lap, holding the begging bowl. His robes. And that's it. That's Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha Shakya, great Shakya from the Shakya family. Totally radiant, beautiful. So also think of it, and this is I find very helpful, as a mirror image of your potential. The reason we meditate in this way, so we can become those qualities. It's like you watching Federer, exactly how he holds the tennis racket, how he holds the ball, exactly what he looks like. It's a powerful method for you to learn how to become like Federer. It's obvious. To know how to play tennis. So here we're learning how to become Buddha. And it's a visual language. We learn the meaning. Every single tiny thing has a meaning. It's not just somebody having a creative idea. Each tiny thing, the way his hand is, the way his head is, the way his eyes are, it's a visual language, and we need to learn the meaning of it, obviously. But he represents totally enlightened body, speech, and mind, and a mirror image of your potential, showing you what you can become. So you visualize, but think like that. radiant light, so beautiful. So now you imagine, there's different ways you can do this. We'll just keep it simple. We visualize from his heart, powerful beams of white light. They make it quite precise. I'll say it like this. You know, it's like first of all, it's like a straw, like a hose of energy. It's like a hose. And in that straw coming from his heart to you, like a tube, it's nectar, white nectar and white light coming from that into you, entering into your heart and filling you completely with this white light and white nectar. And think what it does is totally purify all the obstacles to your own realizations, all your delusions, all your misconceptions, all our lack of understanding of karma, impermanence, emptiness, all these things, compassion, all the obstacles, all the delusions, totally purifying all of this, filling us completely full of this blissful white light and nectar. As we just say the mantra a few times. If you don't know it, just listen and see if you can get used to it. But visualizing, wanting this, totally purifying all your obstacles. Tayata Muni Muni Mahamunaya Swaha. 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 Totally full of this nectar and light, completely blissful. And now Shakyamuni Buddha, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, our Lama as the Buddha, so compassionately, so delightedly sends this hose like a tube of energy, golden light. And in it is golden nectar and light pouring into us. This time, filling us with all the realizations of all the stages of the path to enlightenment. Guru devotion, death and impermanence, refuge, karma, the mind, the delusions, how they cause suffering, renunciation, compassion, bodhicitta, emptiness, all the stages of the path, fully developed in our minds. Imagine receiving all of this golden nectar and golden light, completely filling us, blissful, radiant, so happy. Tayata Muni Muni Mahamunaya Swaha. 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 Full of this golden nectar and golden light, all the realizations, all our own potential perfected. Every single tiny thing that Buddha has realized is exactly what we can realize. That's the point. He's so delighted. So now imagine that the throne dissolves into the lotus, and the lotus dissolves into the sun disk and the moon disk, and they dissolve into the Buddha. And then you imagine he very happily comes to sit above our heads, facing the same way as us. And then he dissolves, dissolves into golden light and absorbs through us. And we imagine the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, the body, speech, and mind of our own Lama, and our body, speech, and mind completely become one. They merge. As Lama Yeshe says, they become union, oneness. And then now imagine for a minute or two, you just expand to fill the universe. No thoughts. As Lama Yeshe would say, zero. As vast as space, radiant, blissful, clear. No thoughts. Imagine. All right, relax now. That's it. A little taste. So we're done, really. That's it. Unless there's any questions. So just please read the course notes. Please just study them. Think about the meaning. Remember what I've said. Put them all together. And that's it, really. Next step. No questions there, Tara?
Looks like no questions. Any questions? I should open that way. Any questions?
Anything at all. All right.
Yeah.
That's the end of our meditation module, gone like a dream. So we've done 2 modules now. We'll have 14 under our belt in a second, I promise you. We'll go there so quickly.
Yes.
So, okay, darling people. So thank you so much. Just keep thinking, analyzing, contemplating. The pennies drop slowly, slowly. Be patient, be humble, be persevering. There's the quality of the Buddha, it seems like, this putting his hand in that mudra and vowing not to move until he got the realizations. He said to really represent enthusiasm, which is this, they call it joyful effort. which is a delight to persevere, you know. It can be effortless. It's almost got to become effortless, joyful effort. Effortless, joyful effort, you know. But never giving up. This is the key. Never giving up. He represents that. So we'll finish with that. Never give up, folks. Never give up on our own marvelous potential. We do our little. Don't put the prayers. No, don't put the prayers. What do you say? What, sweetheart?
I was just going to say a short dedication. Okay.
I'd just rather lead them, and you just think it.
Come on.
Okay, we have to do the words. So just think.
Yes.
These are the words in the prayer. So just think. Here we've been this last 4 weeks, all these, and this 2 hour and a half now, these last 4 weeks, all these seeds we've planted. Every moment that we've been here together is as many seeds. It's marvelous. So we think, may we nourish these seeds with our effort from this second forward, our practice, wherever we're at. May they nourish these seeds that will ripen eventually as our Buddhahood, no matter how long it takes. Be very delighted, so that we then can do the job that we're motivated to do, which is to benefit others long term. And then may this marvelous bodhicitta in the hearts of all grow and grow and grow, this aspiration to be a benefit to others. And then may all our holy lamas live long, all the examples, those knowledge holders out there who are showing us the way. May they all live long, long lives. We need them all. The world needs them badly. That's it, precious ones. Thank you, everybody. Have a good practice day, whoever of you is going to do it. And
Yes.
just keep moving, and we will go to the next module soon. Thank you, precious ones.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Venerable.
Venerable, for being there.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Tara.
Venerable.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, darlings. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.